This is Stateside. I'm April Bear. Just a note that the story we're about to discuss does pertain to suicide. If you or someone you know needs help, the National Suicide and Crisis Lifeline is available all day, every day. You can call or text 988. Or if you need more information, just point a browser toward 988lifeline.org. Now, let's talk about Ben Blostein's life and his death. Ben was a Michigander who grew up in Royal Oak. His parents tried for years to help him out of a downward spiral of mental illness and drug problems, but like a lot of families dealing with an acute mental illness, they sometimes felt like they'd run out of options. In early 2024, Ben's family took a dramatic step, trying to get help for the son who sometimes seemed capable of frightening violence. After nearly 2 months in county custody, Ben Blostein died by suicide. Itai Smatrich-Bar has been reporting this story for the Detroit Free Press, and he joins us now. Hi, Itai.
Hi, April.
So it seems like Ben Blostein's childhood was something a lot of us would recognize. This was an active kid who joined a lot of clubs. He did a lot of sports. Does that sound like how his parents described him?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they really described to me someone who was just really outgoing, made friends in every situation, tried a bunch of new things. I mean, I think like in late high school, there was this sort of shift, right? He got moodier, he got distant. And I think that it was hard to tell at first, right? I mean, what teenager is not a little moody or a little distant?
Right.
But I think the biggest indication came soon after high school when Joel, Ben's father, found him overdosed on what they eventually figured out was heroin. And that was the first time he went to drug treatment. That was, by then he had made 3 attempts at some form of higher education. And they realized that what was, they thought maybe was just a bit of teenage rebellion was really pointing to signs of a much broader and much more serious mental illness.
As he entered his 20s, Ben did hold down jobs and had relationships with girlfriends. He was a big dog guy. He raised a dog he just really loved. But this was a really agonizing time. And by the time he's in his early 30s, his parents were maybe becoming a little bit afraid of him. You open the piece with this heart-wrenching scene between Ben and his dad, Joel, who's trying to decide whether or not to call the police on his own son. Can you talk us through what was going on?
Yeah, well, I think that these kinds of shifts came in little windows and then all at once. So as you said, there were these moments where he was really doing well. Maybe he was clean for a while. Family would describe like, him coming in to help, whether that's like to tile the stairs or his sister described him like driving across the state to help her hang a TV. And by the time he was about to turn 34, and they really started to notice this kind of sudden, really scary spiral. So they weren't sure if this was a new, manifestation of mental illness, whether this was a new drug habit, whether this was both. But what happened was he started to get much more angry, much more hostile, and they got nervous about what he might do. And what you talked about, the opening to this piece, comes after they've tried a couple moments to get him help, tried to get him court-ordered treatment that doesn't quite work. By this point, Joel has taken out a restraining order against him for fear of his own life, because the anger between him and his son had just gotten so scary. And what they told me later, when Ben came to their house, near the middle of the night, totally unannounced, they realized that maybe he was there asking for help, even if he didn't admit it. He walked in the door, he said to his dad, we really need to talk. And Joel was thinking a million things at once. I mean, he told me, thinking how he just wished he could tell his son to go upstairs and go to sleep, thinking, maybe does he need a snack from the kitchen? What can I do for him? But knowing that the fear had just gotten to this point where, what he's supposed to do in this situation with a restraining order is call the police. But he knows that's not going to help his son. And at the same time, he's scared of what his son might do. And actually, Barb said to me that, there was fear both ways, right? So they were scared of their son. And in some ways, their son were scared of them, whether his parents would bring the criminal justice system against him, right, with this restraining order. And that fear was really hard for both of them to overcome. So eventually Ben got up and left, and that was one of the last times that Joel saw his son.
In the lead up to that incident where Ben comes to the house unannounced, he was supposed to be in in a long-term inpatient treatment. Can you tell us a little more about why that didn't happen?
Yeah, so the family is seeing this decline in their son and turned to the courts for help. So they went to the police, fearful of Ben's threats, both against them and against himself, and heard of this process for court-ordered treatment. So under Michigan's mental health code, families of people struggling can petition the court to both allow the police to take someone into protective custody and then to mandate some form of treatment for that person. And that's actually what the family tried. But what happened is very quickly the family began to discover that he wasn't following this treatment plan. There were clear indications he was getting worse. And the involvement of police previously to get him into inpatient care in the first place started leading down this road to criminal charges, which was totally unexpected, and made them worried about engaging the court-ordered treatment system again.
If you're just joining us, we're talking with Itai Smotrich-Bar, who's been reporting a story for the Detroit Free Press about the life and death of Ben Blostein, who grew up in Royal Oak. It appeared in the Detroit Free Press, and it was a story produced in collaboration with the Investigative Reporting Lab at Yale. So, just when you think Ben's story can't get any more difficult, several months go by. Ben is out of police custody. He's increasingly more hostile toward his parents, and he's sending them threatening messages. Finally, in November of 2023, he is arrested on drug and gun charges based on what police in Royal Oak found when they took him into custody earlier that year. He posts bond. He's back out the same day. And in winter of 2024, he breaks into his parents' house and he goes after his father. The scuffle leads to a 911 call. This is a worst case scenario for Ben's parents, and then Ben is in jail for 7 weeks. What can you tell us about his life was like there?
Yeah, well, a lot, actually, that I've looked through documents that have arisen from a resulting legal case and also from Freedom of Information Act requests. We're able to piece together a fair bit of his life in the Oakland County Jail, but there's also a lot we don't know about what daily life looked like and what policies govern daily life. And as you said, I mean, this episode that lands him in jail, comes from this long-standing mental health crisis that both brought him in contact with police before, that led to these charges that made him angry and isolated and really in conflict with his parents, who are the main force trying to bring him help. And by the time he ends up in jail, a lot of that seems to be flattened into, a home invasion charge, a drug charge, and critically, a warning from the Royal Oak police that just after they arrested him for assaulting his father, that Ben had tried to take apart a piece of metal and hide it. And so what happens is when Ben is brought into the Oakland County Jail, he's placed in high maximum security housing because he had attempted to hide this metal while in Royal Oak police custody the couple days prior.
To be clear, he's not in prison. It's not exactly what we think of as solitary confinement, but it sounds like it was pretty close.
Yeah, so the experts I've spoken to say pretty clearly that this is solitary confinement. So this is a cell, it's about 5 by 8. He's the only one in it, and his movements in and out of the cell are extremely limited. We've seen from the records that there's only 10 opportunities that were recorded for him to leave his cell, to walk or to shower. And the jail didn't answer any questions about how they record that movement in and out of this facility, so we don't know if he left the cell more than those 10 times for recreation. But the experts will say that solitary confinement really boils down to the ability to have meaningful human contact with other people. And in this single man cell, although he can sort of call out into the hallway where other men are held, he can't see the faces of the men held immediately to his right and to his left. And with these very limited opportunities to leave the cell, with restrictions that the jail places on people in high maximum security, so they can't attend group programs like Alcoholics Anonymous, they can't have visitation, those sorts of things. the experts will tell me that this looks a lot like solitary confinement. But I do want to clarify the jail in legal filings has said that they don't consider this solitary confinement, that they don't consider it isolation. And the jail points to this ability by Ben and other men held in maximum security to call out to others held in nearby cells and to talk that way through the hall.
Yeah. What can you tell us about the days and weeks that led up to Ben's death? I mean, this is a guy who has a record of being in an active mental health crisis. What was happening? Was there any effort to address what was going on with him within the jail?
Yeah, well, it's really not clear that the jail had any record of this crisis that landed him in their custody. And the jail has said that they had multiple evaluations and they found that Ben was not a suicide risk. And they cite that he verbally denied suicidal ideation on multiple occasions. The tricky part is there is this record of, as you said, the court-ordered treatment. He was actually diagnosed with bipolar disorder while in inpatient care, that brief moment of inpatient care. And actually, there's records from the Royal Oak Police Department showing that when he took that medal to hide while in custody, he told a Royal Oak detective that he intended to use the medal to hurt himself. He also asked a detective, he asked a detective to shoot him. And those records of suicidal ideation are clear in the police record. The jail has said that those statements were never communicated to them, and that they didn't consider Ben to be a suicide risk. And so we see that when he was in custody of the Oakland County Jail, that we see that when he was in the custody of the Oakland County Jail, that he was referred to psychiatric treatment for anxiety, but that there's no record in his mental health history of any of these things that we were just talking about. And so when he finally gets a psychiatric appointment, it's a 26-minute virtual visit, and it's on this basis of anxiety. And so there's not a clear understanding of, I would say, the crisis that landed him there and the severity of the mental illness.
How did his parents find out about his death?
Yeah, 2 sheriff's deputies came and knocked on their door. They came back 2 days later. They gave some of his belongings from the jail cell in a clear plastic bag, and the details of Ben's life in the jail and his death came out to this family really slowly. They started filing Freedom of Information Act requests to the jail when they couldn't get the records that they were asking for. They didn't have a clear sense of what had happened. And in fact, some of their curiosity was sparked by getting messages from people held in nearby cells to Ben, saying that soon before his death, Ben had sort of announced an intention to either check out or hang himself, depending on what different people had said, and that they were calling for help, and that prompted the family to really have serious concerns about what led up to their son's death and what policies the jail had in place to prevent a jail suicide.
Blostein's family has filed a lawsuit against Oakland County for Ben's death. Can you explain what the lawsuit is saying and what would be in play for their claim to be found to have merit?
The lawsuit alleges that the conditions of Ben's confinement violated his civil rights and led to his death. And it's really based, so I'm not a lawyer, so take this with a grain of salt, but my understanding is it's really based on this idea that the jail ignored a clear and obvious medical need, that medical need being the need for mental health care and for suicide prevention for someone who was severely mental ill and someone who was expressing suicidal ideation. Now, in court filings, the jail has said that they did not find Ben to be a suicide risk despite multiple evaluations. They've said that he's verbally denied suicidal ideation on multiple occasions while in custody, and for that reason that they were not ignoring a clear and obvious risk of suicide. And from what I understand from other cases that I've seen, that may be enough to discredit the claim. Now, I don't know how the case will play out in this specific case, but often, from what I've seen, these cases are argued over the idea that did the jail clearly know that this person was a suicide risk? And one of the questions that I wanted to pose in this article, outside the arguments being made in the jailhouse about did the jail know, is should the jail have known, and what could our systems be doing more broadly to protect people who are severely mentally ill and who are detained in our local jails.
Itai, the Blostein family had spent so many years trying to pull Ben back from the edge. And given that there were times when he was behaving in a very frightening way, they just did not have a lot of options. And it seems hard to ask what could have happened differently in this years-long story. Did they talk to you at all about intervention points, either within the jail or within the court-ordered treatment process they tried to pursue, about what might have made the difference?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a lot of them, unfortunately. There's not one clear answer, right, to what went wrong here. But there are many intervention points that they and some of the experts I've spoken to will point to. So, for one, this process for court-ordered treatment. Are there ways to, A, make it much easier to keep people in treatment? I mind you, we're talking about people who may have severe mental illness and who, although you want to respect their individual rights, you also want to make sure that's not someone who can sign themselves out of an inpatient facility and not worry about it again. And so there are actually some bills that have passed both the Michigan House and the Michigan Senate, although they need to be reconciled, that work to address some of those points. And on a similar note, the family is concerned about the use of criminal charges arising from evidence that arose from this.
A mental health intervention, basically.
A mental health intervention.
Yeah.
And trying to make it easier for families to not worry that asking the police for help with their child will result in incarceration. And then on the side of the jail, this family feels very strongly that the effects of solitary confinement led to increased deterioration of Ben's mental state, and there are psychological experts that will testify to the same, that solitary confinement can be really, really damaging to everyone, but particularly people with severe mental illness. And so the family is trying to push for more limits on solitary confinement, and more broadly, for more requirements from the jail to identify and protect mentally ill detainees.
Itai Smotrich-Bar reported on the life and death of Ben Blostein for the Detroit Free Press in collaboration with the Investigative Reporting Lab at Yale. You can find his story about how a mental health crisis became a suicide in the Oakland County Jail at the Free Press website. Itai, thank you.
Thank you, April.